I think you're exactly right. I think that in many ways the existential threats which have been on every voter's mind around the world are still very much present at the forefront of the French voter's mind as well. And the interesting thing about yesterday's election is that in many ways it does what it says on the tin. In other words, it has been a major victory for the French Greens, but it has been a major local victory for the French Greens. And I'm not entirely sure that I would read into it a very national message either. I think that, we need to bear in mind the French people have been under very severe lockdown for 2 months. And I think it made them understand their local situation very differently than was the case before.
Michael, I'm currently reading the John Bolton book about Trump, and in the early pages they talk about how a savvy operator Monsieur Macron is and was with his exchanges with the US president as well. For such a savvy operator to be outflanked by the Greens on an issue which he feels so passionately about, is that a political misstep that the Greens have taken that higher ground on environmental issues?
Yes and no. I mean, he will be extremely disappointed today because the result, despite the framing of his main lieutenants, has been a very bad one for the République En Marche. There is no doubt about it. At the same time, the result is also a bit of a headache for all of his main opponents as well, because the left of President François Hollande, the socialists, are going to find themselves in a very difficult situation because they need some sort of left-wing union in order to be able to challenge Macron. But their own results have not been particularly spectacular. And moreover, if they want some sort of unity with the Greens, the price of that union is going to be a lot higher than would have been the case a few weeks ago. Potentially, the Greens might even ask to have the main candidate in a presidential election, for instance, after leaving it to a socialist last time round. And the right did not very well either. The right of President Sarkozy, they lost Marseille, the only very large city they were still leading, and they haven't made any major gain in any very large cities. The only two very large cities in France that are still controlled by the right are Toulouse, which is a bit of a surprise, and Nice, which is not very much a surprise, but they lost very significant cities like Bordeaux, for instance, which have been historically right-wing for a very long time. So I think that the result is going to create a bit of a headache for Macron, but equally it is paradoxically a challenge for all of his main opponents as well.
Michael, can I ask you then what happens in terms of government reaction to this election result? Do we see an extension of the furloughing scheme? Does Macron try and address this with more fiscal largesse at this point to try and win across people by appealing to their pocketbook?
I think he might try. I think the first reaction is that Macron is going to try and focus on the so-called Citizens' Convention, some sort of deliberative exercise that he organized in recent weeks and which just gave back its verdict last week, and which is precisely making some proposals about environmental change. So I think he's going to try and see whether he can hijack the green agenda by dialoguing directly with citizens rather than the Green Party themselves. But I think what is the important message probably for La République En Marche is that the French people in 2017 gave Macron a mandate to do what he was promising, which was to do politics differently in a way and to be a leader which would be neither right-wing nor left-wing. And I think that in some ways there has been some accusation that progressively it's become more of a right-wing government, effectively, in recent months. And one of the important results is that in local areas like Lyon and Strasbourg, where La République En Marche tried to make an explicit alliance with the right to save the scheme, that didn't work. In other words, they did even worse than in many other places where the La République En Marche candidates were fighting on their own. So I think that probably what he's going to try and do, or probably what he should be trying to do, would be to rejuvenate that message of doing politics differently, maybe getting more people from civil society, and probably trying to poach a few current or former Green leaders if he can convince them to enter his government.